I wrote structural combat. Let's read some of it. At this point, until there is an internationally uniform definition which adequately protects human beings from the rights violations associated with terrorism, the Braid will assert the following tiered definition. The tiers will establish what the crime of terrorism is and a variety of necessary factors to determine how severe a given act is. Oh, that's terrorism in concept. Terrorism as an international crime. T1. Any act intended or recklessly or negligently imposed to cause death or serious bodily injury or a prolonged state of hypervigilance to a civilian or group of civilians, especially when the purpose of such an act is to intimidate a population into surrendering the protection of its rights, or to compel states and organizations to behave against the interests of human rights. T2, the crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when intention is proven. T3, the crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when it targets peoples based on identity, such as ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or region of origin. T4, the crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when it targets peoples based on political, religious, philosophical, or ideological expression. T5, the crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when it targets journalists, aid distributors, doctors, and nurses. T6, the crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when it targets infrastructure which has a primary purpose of providing human needs to human beings, such as residential buildings, crops, food storage, aid distribution sites, water treatment, hospitals, etc., and by extension, electrical infrastructure. The crime of terrorism is to a greater degree when it aligns with the genocidal erasure of a culture. TF1, the crime of terrorism is also committed by states or corporations to a lesser extent when facilitated in the forms of organizing, sponsoring, ordering, financing, encouraging, or tolerating acts of terrorism, especially when the organization which facilitates the crime of terrorism also has a legal responsibility to adhere to human rights standards. The crime of terrorism is also committed by individuals with large followings or organizations stochastically. Stochastic terrorism is repeated, dehumanizing rhetoric spoken from a public figure that targets a specific group based on who they are, which results in some predictable percentage of the listeners to enact violence against a member or members of the targeted group. And TE1, insurrection, revolt, treason, and the destruction or seizing of state property and other such acts are exempt from being classified as terrorism when the perpetrators are engaging in their right of resistance in defense of human rights in ways that do not endanger civilians.